welcome to episode 12 of Live from Vaders Castle. I'm John Lee, and I'm obviously joined by my co-host, Dan McCrory.
Hello there.
How are you, Dan?
I'm good. This is a strange episode, this one, because we're pre-recording this, so it's not a Bad Batch episode. We will, on the episode next week, we'll be covering 2 episodes of Bad Batch because I'm going on my holidays. So we're pre-recording this before I go away. If anyone needs any explanation.
Yeah, in case anyone was wondering.
I'm going down to England to see some pals, John being one of them.
So, coming down south.
The Vaders Castle boys will be hanging out. So yeah, today we thought instead of doing the Bad Batch, because we can't do it because it hasn't come out yet, we're doing a special episode dedicated to everyone's favourite Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader, and we're calling this episode Vader's Greatest Hits. Are you excited for this, John?
I am. I was surprised how many he has, because obviously the films are he's not in many of the films overall, because obviously that's not, how many there are now, like 12. He's only in like 3 or 4, well, 4. So the greatest hits are definitely, they feature some across all multimedias, which was very surprising to me.
Yeah, he has great moments in everything he appears in, from the comics to the books to the video games to the films to the TV shows. So we've got it all covered. We've probably missed a lot of moments, whether they're because we've forgotten about them or because they're from books or comics that we might not have read yet. So if you do have any more that we've missed, please let us know when we get to the end of the episode. Send us a message on the Instagram or the Twitter and say, oh, you forgot this epic moment. Because if we haven't seen it or read it, then it will be good for us to know about it.
Yes, please. I mean, I feel like we've got quite a lot covered. But there's such a long list. There's definitely some we've missed off.
It is a big list. I mean, we've sort of split the list between each other. And then we'll introduce each of the moments and then we'll discuss it. Or we will, for this one, before we say the moment, we just sort of give you a spoiler warning for what thing it spoils, because obviously there will be some people who have only watched the films and won't mind us talking about the films, but might not be happy about us spoiling, I don't know, a comic that they're like looking forward to read or something like that. So we will sort of specify what we're about to spoil when we talk about it. But we're basically just going to go through and talk about those moments of Darth Vader that, you know, makes your jaw drop or your blood boil or makes you hide behind your sofa, because he is arguably the greatest pop culture villain of all time, personally, in my opinion. I don't think any other villain in any fictional story comes close. I don't know what John thinks, but he's had a lot of great moments. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to discussing these, actually. I think there's going to be very interesting to really actually discuss some of these moments, and instead of just sitting at home reading on them or watching them, to actually get to talk about it, it'd be quite exciting.
Yeah, exactly. So should we start off with the comics? Because the comics probably maybe known the least of our listeners, perhaps. Obviously, these moments aren't as well known or iconic as some of the moments in the films, but I think we both could argue that a lot of these moments are sort of just as impressive or great. So the comics is where we'll start.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start. I've got quite a few comic ones, but I think I'm going to start with my actual personal favourite, and the one that comes to mind when I'm sitting there, bored late at night, or thinking, just this is such a moment that stands out in my mind when I think about Star Wars comics and Darth Vader as a character. And as Dan said, this is, for the spoiler warning, this is from Vader Down issue. It's a one-shot issue, but it ties in with the Star Wars run at the time. So avoid all of that if you don't want to get spoiled. But yeah, Vader Down issue 1. And to give you a brief introduction about this badass moment, Vader is called in or summoned to fight off against a bunch of rebel alliances ships, basically above a planet. takes out God knows how many of them before he's eventually crashes on the planet. He's not shot down, mind you. Luke just crashes into him in a little space collision, and he ends up landing on the planet. So I think it's called, forgive my pronunciation, Vogros Vas, something like that.
Yeah, Vogros Vas, I think is the.
I don't know if we've seen it in any other Star Wars multimedia.
I believe it's the first appearance, if I'm correct. But
I feel like a name like that would stand out.
I think it's home to an old Jedi temple, I believe.
Yes, I think that's what the tie-in is. I think there's quite a few characters that are trying to find something at this temple. Obviously, Luke being one of them, and then Vader being another. Basically, he crash lands on this planet, and basically the rebels try and seize their opportunity, and they're like, all right, there's God knows how many of us, I want to say at least 40, 50, maybe even more, versus one man, Darth Vader. You know, they have ships, they've got loads of them, they've got heavy artillery, and they're like, right, finally, we're going to take this man out.
Yeah, I'm looking at the splash page right now. I definitely think there's at least 100 rebels. I'm going to say that's my estimate.
Oh, we've upped the ante here as well. At least 100. So I think the Vader Down comic ends with the panels of its the rebels are basically shouting at Vader like, all right, stand down, you're surrounded.
Yeah, they say, Darth Vader, lay down your weapons, you are surrounded.
Yeah, which is then followed by the most iconic and just absolute badass line I think I've heard of any villain, let alone Darth Vader, which is his line is, all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men, as he ignites his lightsaber and then proceeds to massacre them all. That then follows in the Star Wars comic.
Yeah, it goes into him like making all of their thermal detonators that they're carrying ignite, and they all just blow up. Basically, is what happens.
Oh, it's just, there's some days I just can't get that line out of my head. It's just, unbelievable. Like the pure confidence, and then to be a rebel soldier at that time as well, the confidence is high. You'd be like, right, we've got him. And to hear him say that, you'd just be like, surely this man's bonkers.
Yeah, I think what I really love about this moment so much is I've got the graphic novel out in front of me, so I'm literally just looking at it right now. But the splash page which this is on, you've just got this massive view of like all these rebels surrounding Vader, guns pointed at him. He's standing there like a lone black figure, his cloak like blowing in the wind, looking badass, and they're just like, oh, you're surrounded. And then obviously he comes out of his incredible line, all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men. And it's just one of those moments. It just goes to show that Vader knows no one can have him. He knows that even 100 rebels, doesn't matter, he'll take all of them on. He's too much of a beast. And obviously when you go into the next issue, you see how he takes them all on, which is just pure power of the Force. But yeah, it is that cliffhanger ending and that incredible line on that splash page that is definitely seared in both of our memories.
I think as well earlier when I give it a quick Google just to remind myself of some of the details. I'm pretty sure it said on one article I was reading that he obviously killed the 100 rebels that were surrounding him at the time, and then he just kind of waited around for reinforcements. There was no sense of urgency about him. He was all right. You're going to call in more? Call in more. Like, my bloodlust is, I've not finished yet. I've crashed my ship. I'm pissed off. Send more men my way. So I think just absolutely goes to show the sheer dominance of the man. And I think that is probably why, as I said when I was introducing it, that is one of my favourite Vader moments on any sort of multimedia. And I'd love to see it in some sort of animation or like live action thing. There's some of these moments I'd love to see an adaptation of on the screen. Yeah, just to hear James L. Jones muster that line would be
it'd be incredible. Yeah, it's one of those moments. I think a lot of these like greatest moments for Vader, I feel like they sort of really show his power. And I think obviously the point of Vader is that he is basically an unbeatable Sith. Only Luke ultimately could be the one to defeat him. So I think this is just another example of like sort of a bit of wider reading and, you know, seeing in other parts of canon where he is just so powerful and he literally is a one-man army. And I think that theme is quite common in some of these greatest hits that we've got.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's just one of those things when you have like comics or like other multimedia apart from films. It really goes. You can explore a lot more, and I think they've definitely done that with some of these comics that I will continue to mention. The next one on here, we're going to stick with comics for now. Is this one's from Vader Dark Visions. So again, if you haven't read that one, maybe skip ahead 10 minutes so that you don't get it spoiled for you.
Yeah, I haven't read it, so I'm about to get it spoiled, but that's fine. We're doing it for the content.
Dark Visions is it's a 5-issue miniseries, but each issue is like its own individual thing. So just skip issue 1 and then feel free to read like 2 to 5 if you don't want it spoiled for you. But anyway, basically this story is Vader basically lands on this planet after a space battle to like repair his ship and things. And as he lands on this planet, it turns out that the planet has recently been invaded by this gigantic space monster. I don't think they ever give it a name. I think it's just ever referred to as like a Goliath or something like that. But it's implied that this monster is basically capable of like plucking ships out of the air as they land. You know, it's like he's basically decimated the local town, et cetera, et cetera. So this thing is like a huge beast. It kind of looks like a mix between what I wrote down was looks between a mix between a shark and like a rhino. It's got like a really triangle, like pointy nose with like loads of teeth. But
it's quite an interesting combination.
Absolutely massive. Like it's probably the same size as like a skyscraper or something, or like Godzilla. Like it's fucking huge. So basically, Vader comes down, sees this creature, and decides, you know what? Yeah, I'll take this on. I'm not scared. And finds himself a space horse looking thing, like an alien horse, who is just like Vader, all black. Finds himself a little shield, and ignites his lightsaber and goes to town and just absolutely destroys this beast in an act of, I suppose you would say, self-prevalent. No, what's the word I'm looking for?
Preservation.
That's the one, preservation. But what's really interesting about this issue is that the story's kind of told from like a person watching on, like a little kid watching on. So what's really cool is obviously Vader's basically just killed this monster because he doesn't want the monster to eat him, and because he just likes killing things, and probably at that point was like, well, I'll give it a go. I'm powerful enough, I can do it. But what's really interesting is once he kills this monster, and then obviously the Empire come down, pick him up, and he leaves, like the planet worship him like a hero, like a god who's just come down and like save them from this beast, not knowing that he's Darth Vader because they're quite like a remote planet. So not only does he just kill and wipe out this absolute beast of a monster, he's then worshipped as like a hero / god by this race of people, and he leaves.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously I haven't got around to reading this one yet, but that does sound pretty epic. And I have seen, obviously, like the cover of that issue with the image of Vader on the horse, and that's always been something that's been sort of seared in my memory. It's a very cool image. But it was, for some reason, I've read every single other Vader comic apart from this one. So I will get around to reading it very soon. But I love that idea that Vader can go to a planet, slaughter a monster, and then the people there then see him as a god. I think that's a really cool idea. Yeah,
I think, to be fair, the only reason that he then didn't murder the rest of them was because like the Empire was like showed up at that point and was like, all right, we've got to go. So he was like, okay, like you're safe for now.
Saved by the bell.
Yeah, kind of. I think otherwise the village probably would have got massacred as well, just to feed Vader's rage, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a pretty epic moment. Do you want me to take the next one, or have you got anything else to say about that one?
No, you go. I've been talking.
So the next one I've got, this is from the Darth Vader 2015. series by Kieran Gillen. This is actually one of my favorite series of comics. I really, really love this. It's set in the same timeline as the Vader down that we just talked about beforehand, after A New Hope, but before Empire Strikes Back. The whole concept of the series is that after the Death Star blowing up, obviously Tarkin's dead, so Palpatine doesn't really have anyone to pin it on, so he just pins it on Vader and blames him for the failure at the Death Star. So he sort of gets a bit of a demotion, basically. He loses a lot of his power. He gets Admiral Targa, who's one of the Imperials that you see in the room in A New Hope when Vader sort of chokes one of them, is sort of put as a superior to him. And the whole series is about Vader sort of re-establishing his position within the Empire and surviving a load of Palpatine sort of cruel tests. However, this moment which I particularly love, which is in issue number 6, deals with Vader discovering that he has a son. So this is a moment which I think is a hugely important moment in canon, which was never seen in the films, how he found out that Luke was his son. But what happens is Vader's very suspicious about this young rebel boy who's blown up the Death Star. He sensed the Force in him, he sensed that he had sort of been Obi-Wan's sort of apprentice for a little bit. So he sends Boba Fett off to try and figure out who he is. And Boba Fett raids old Ben Kenobi's place and finds out that the kid is called Luke Skywalker. So he comes to Vader on the deck of Vader's on a Star Destroyer that he's on. I'm just going to get it up in front of me just so I don't misquote some of this, because there's some epic lines here. He says, "Did you bring me anything of value, bounty hunter? Not much, just his name, Skywalker." And then you've just got this like shot of Vader like crushing his hands with the Force, and then you just see the window in front of him just like cracks, and then he's like, "I have a son," and then it just like continues to crack, and then Boba leaves, and then like Vader's just staring out through this like window at like this whole fleet, and he's like, "It will be mine, it will all be mine," which is like his son will be his, the Empire will be his, the galaxy will be his. And I just think this is such an epic moment for multiple reasons. Like emotionally for Vader, this is a very important moment because he finds out that the Emperor's lied to him, that Padme survived long enough to give birth. He wasn't actually the one who like physically killed her, like the Emperor had said. He finds out that he has a son who's been kept away from him for years. So emotionally, it's a huge moment for Vader because he's just angry, just more and more anger, which is obviously what fuels his power as a Sith. But then it's also a big moment for just showing who Vader really is. Like his response to this is just like cracking a window with the Force and then just like deciding that he's just going to take all of it, the whole galaxy. He wants to overthrow the Emperor. Everything's just going to be his one day. And it's that madness with power that we saw all the way back with Anakin on Mustafar. So I just think it's such an important moment for Vader. It's such a beautiful moment in terms of the artwork, the dialogue, the silence in that scene as well. And even though it's on a page, when you're reading it, it feels like it's a scene that you're watching in like a TV show or a film. So I just think it's such an incredible moment. And anytime that I'm like bored, I'll just sort of grab the graphic novel off the shelf and just flick through to issue 6, just so I can see that I have a son moment, because it's such an iconic shot, iconic panel. So yeah, that's another suggestion from me. You've read this moment, haven't you, John?
Yeah, I have actually. That is actually such a great moment. For, as you said, it's nice seeing that we finally get a in canon like visual, I suppose, of that moment of Vader discovering his Luke as his son, as well as that's a good point actually about the whole like Vader thinking about more power and stuff. That's a great link back to Anakin and Revenge of the Sith. I didn't even think of that when I actually read the issue, so that's some great analysis there. It's such a cool shot.
His exact line is, "He will be mine, it will all be mine." So it's that point of like, because obviously we know in Empire that Vader wants him to join him so they can overthrow the Emperor, but this is essentially when that decision's made. 2 years pretty much before Empire Strikes Back, and that's all that sort of continues to fuel Vader and fuel his anger and his rage, is this sort of idea of just taking over the galaxy and using his son to his advantage. And it's at this point, it's nothing to do with love. It's all just pure rage and hatred, which is classic Vader.
No, that's a great point, actually. Have you got any other comic ones? I've got one more.
Yeah, I've got one more as well.
Nice.
You go for yours first. This is both from the same series. Actually, no, I'll go for mine first because mine is before yours chronologically.
Cool.
So both of these are from Charles Soule's Darth Vader run from 2017. No surprise, me and John talk about Charles Soule all the time, hoping that eventually he's going to hear us rambling about him so much and he's going to agree to let us interview him, because that would be the greatest moment of my life. But this is from the first arc of Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, which is the first collection of stories in this comic arc. And this is immediately after Revenge of the Sith. The Emperor basically says, like, right, you're a Sith now, you need your own lightsaber. And the only way that Sith gets his lightsaber is by killing a Jedi and stealing their kyber crystal and bleeding it red. So this is basically the story of how Vader gets his red lightsaber. And he finds out that in the wake of Order 66, there's a Jedi still alive who, what's the term for it? He takes the, I think it's what's it called? Barash vow, something like that. It's essentially when a Jedi sort of leaves the Order but goes off on his own to literally just study the Force and just be in the Force and essentially just meditate nonstop for like the rest of their life. And he finds the location of one of them, and the former Jedi is called Kirak Infala. So he hunts him down. He goes to just kill him and get his lightsaber, but it turns out this Don is quite strong. Sort of soon as they meet, he immediately just lobs Vader off of a cliff and basically breaks his suit. And you've got to remember, this is just post Revenge of the Sith, so Vader's not used to fighting in this new clunky suit that Palpatine's given him. Palpatine has made this suit so it constantly hurts Vader to fuel his anger and his rage more, make him a more powerful Sith. So you'd understand that his first fight, he's actually probably going to get his ass handed to him because he's not used to fighting in this suit. So going back to that little boy on Tatooine who made C-3PO, he manages to fix his suit back together using some of his engineering tactics. No, not tactics, that's the wrong word. Techniques. There you go. And he hunts this guy back down and continues to fight him. And this guy's sort of taunting him the whole time until they reach this point on the top of this dam. And he throws a couple of security guards off. And this guy, the Jedi, catches them with the Force. And Vader's like, this is this guy's weakness. It's compassion. So what he does is he just breaks the dam to flood this entire city full of innocent civilians. And because of that, obviously, the Jedi turns to try and save them. And Vader just uses that as an opportunity to snap his neck, kill him dead, left the city to flood, took his kyber crystal and then bled it. And then that's how Darth Vader got his lightsaber. And I just think this, like, the artwork, the storytelling, everything from this bit of the comic is incredible. But what that means for Vader is the fact that, he loses his first fight, essentially. But then he figures out his enemy's weakness, which is that they care about innocent civilians. So he uses that to his disadvantage and goes to kill innocent civilians just to beat him. And I think that's a really good way of like understanding Vader as he became Vader right at the beginning, which translates so well into the Vader that we see in the original trilogy and everything. Someone who doesn't care about anyone but himself and but his own gain. And it all sort of stemmed from this quite significant moment when he got his lightsaber. And I think it's just such a thematically important scene. I think Charles Soule absolutely nails it. Yeah.
That's an excellent scene. I think it's such an excellent way to kick off the series, actually, for Charles Soule. It was like a big huge fight. Vader loses, and then Vader comes back and just, as you said, it's like a real, I suppose, chronologically, like first showing of like his proper just ruthlessness. It's like, right, we'll flood this whole village just to get one lightsaber.
Yeah, and it's his first real test, isn't it? After becoming Vader the machine as opposed to the man.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult because literally this entire 25 issue series, every single issue could be one of Vader's greatest hits because it is one of the most well written and iconic comic series of like the last decade, basically. And Charles Soule kills it in every single episode. But this is a moment that really stood out for me when I was reading it of like, damn, this Vader guy's hard.
Yeah. It just reminded me actually while you were talking about that. Literally, I think when Vader because he goes off to a little base, doesn't he, to find the records for like Jedi, and there's two clone troopers who are like standing guard, and one of them obviously they both try and kill Vader when he shows up because they don't know who he is, and one of them
they mistaken him for a Jedi because of his lightsaber.
And one of them tries to blow him up with a grenade, doesn't he? And I remember the dialogue between the two clones like vividly, and one of them's like, "Oh, like I've worked with Jedi for so long, he can't hold that grenade in because the grenade's like actually exploding, but Vader's using the Force to like hold the explosion in." And the clone's like, "Oh, he can't like put all his concentration into that grenade and then like stop us as well." And Vader's just like, "Yeah, I can, bitch," and just like I think he like just snaps their necks as well. And it's just like it was like, right, you're not messing with a normal Jedi here.
Yeah, that's another great
Darth
moment,
Vader.
Isn't it? Yeah, I think that's like the second issue, isn't it? Of this series, basically. Yeah,
because he goes to that base to find that Jedi you were just on about. So that just reminded me of it.
And I think the whole thing about Vader, particularly this point in his life, is that Palpatine is essentially just torturing him constantly. Like the whole series opens with just Palpatine just electrocuting the shit out of him. Like, the immediate moment in Revenge of the Sith when he's like, no, you just like we cut to another scene there, but what actually happens after that is just Palps just like electrocutes him until he sort of begs practically. But Palpatine knows that the only way that he's going to make him the Dark Lord of the Sith, the most powerful Sith Lord, is by torturing him constantly and making him feel so much pain and anger and hatred towards him, because that's the only way that he'll become stronger in the dark side. And it's so twisted, but makes so much sense.
That's very good. And that leads on very nicely to my one, which is obviously, as you said, in the same comic run. Mine's issue 18. It's a little bit further down the 25 issue run. I'm pretty sure it's 18. I did Google it earlier. Yeah, definitely 18. And basically, this issue is Vader calls a favor for Tarkin. Tarkin owes Vader a favor. So naturally, Vader being Vader, he requests that Tarkin they go to Tarkin's home planet, I'm pretty sure. And
Iriadu, by the way, if you need your little nerd brain there, Iriadu's the name of the planet.
Thank you. So Vader asks him to go there, and he's like, well, just hunt me, because I think it's in, I can't remember where, I think it might have been in Clone Wars. Basically, Tarkin is, like, his family are like vivid hunters back on, his home planet, and they're raised to be like the toughest of the tough. They got to go out and kill to earn their place in the family, basically, sort of thing.
Yeah, Tarkin's family is messed up. Like, there's scenes where they like set wolves on Tarkin as a kid just so he can survive, because their way of living is like only the toughest survive. You have to be a predator to survive. So if you get killed by wolves as an 8-year-old, then tough luck. You're not fit to survive. So Tarkin's a beast.
Yeah, it's like the opening scene of 300, isn't it? And he's fighting the wolf. Probably pretty similar to that. So basically, Vader, I'm pretty sure Tarkin takes his lightsaber as well. So Vader's lightsaberless on a foreign planet, which obviously Tarkin is very accustomed to, being that he's from there. And basically, Tarkin has to hunt him down within a certain time frame, or Vader wins.
And he has help from a load of other sort of hunters who become cannon fodder. Yeah,
so Tarkin, being clever, decides to one of the help Dan's just mentioned there is, I can't remember the species of the alien, but he's basically a bat. He's got like huge ears, that are, very helpful for like listening to Vader's breathing device, so that Tarkin can always, know if Vader's near. So what? Because sorry, quick side note. Because Vader has already killed the most apex predator on that planet by the time the issue comes around, and that is, I think it's called a Valath or something like that. And basically, their skin like changes coloring and they can like camouflage and stuff. So off panel or like off issue, I suppose, Vader's already killed one of them and has the cloak or skin of this apex predator. So Tarkin gets his alien friend with big ears to basically listen in and see where to know if Vader's nearby, because it's his breathing device. He needs it. It's always on. Like, any scene with Darth Vader in like films, TV shows, that breathing device is the iconic noise that follows behind. So what does Vader do in this instance? He just turns it off. He's like, I don't need to breathe. It's fine. There's a couple of scenes where Vader, basically just ambushes them by turning off his breathing device. And there's a panel in the comic where I think it's like a nice zoom in on like Tarkin's face and just like the shock on his face when he realizes that Vader's like right next to him, basically, and he's done it by just basically holding his breath for however long, or suffocating himself for however long it's taken him.
It's more than just like holding his breath. It's essentially is like suffocating himself half to death.
Yeah, just to get.
But he sort of powers through just through pure dark sideness.
Yeah. So then Vader kills basically all of Tarkin's comrades. And is about to kill Tarkin, or win, I suppose. I don't actually know if he's going to kill him, because I think Palp would be a bit annoyed. But basically, he was about to win their little bet when Tarkin basically leads him into like an area of the planet where Vader just gets struck by lightning. So Tarkin's leading into an area which is like a storm hotspot, I suppose, and he's taking a big metal man into this storm hotspot, knowing exactly what's going to happen is he's going to get hit by lightning. So Vader gets struck by lightning and Tarkin's gloating, as Tarkin does. And Vader just is lying on the floor and just force chokes him so much that basically, I think the panels and like the descriptions of Tarkin's like in a monologue is basically just like he's proven his point that even when like he's down and out for the count, like he will do whatever it takes to win, and there's no way you can take him out. Like you have to kill him.
Yeah.
The man gets struck by lightning wearing a metal electrical suit, and he's still able to sit and force choke you almost to death.
Yeah, he's adapted from all of Palpatine's electrocutions. At this point, he's just used to it. Yeah, I think it's such an epic because it's quite a strange issue, like structurally, and not in a negative way, but that sort of Vader arc of series is sort of split into loads of sort of mini arcs, and then this is sort of almost like a one-off between sort of the previous one and then going into like the final 6 issues, which is to do with Vader's castle. So it sort of sits as a one-off, and I was sort of reading it and I was thinking, this is cool, but like, what's the point? And then it like gets to the end and you sort of realize this has all been just like an elaborate test, like in some twisted way of Vader trying to test himself. And you're like, okay, this guy, he's a badass. He's
crazy.
He can't be beat.
Man's built different.
Yeah. So sort of, I guess it fits into the theme really of what we've been talking about, of these sort of greatest pits for Vader. It's just showing how tough and how ridiculously strong with the dark side Vader is. And I think it's like, in terms of sort of reinforcing who Vader is, I think is actually like really sort of quite essential reading. And I think almost as difficult as it is to improve the original trilogy because they're already perfect, but almost sort of just gives you even more context and value to Vader as a villain, and just continues to prove that, he is the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the original trilogy, I think the Vader in the original trilogy inspired like so much, obviously like one of the biggest pop culture villains ever, but like just his mere presence. And I can imagine sitting in the cinema for the first time watching Star Wars, as it was called then, not A New Hope, Star Wars, like the original one, and watching him walk onto screen and just like just like the dread or fear you can imagine seeing him on that screen. And now through all like this other multimedia that I'm sure we'll discuss as we just discussed the comics, it's really goes to show that he's earned that notoriety that he basically just earned himself by just being a presence on screen. You know, he doesn't. Like, I think some of the most badass moments come away from the original trilogy, but they are just that he just earns it so well just by doing basically the bare minimum of just standing there and looking frightening.
Yeah. I mean, when we get on to the greatest hits in the films, a lot of them is sort of just that. It's essentially his presence, and I think that's what in the films works so well, is that, you know, Vader isn't jumping all over the place and, you know, spinning through the air and electrocuting everyone all at once. It's his presence alone, and it's like the breathing, and it's the way that he enters scenes and says nothing but says a lot in the films, which makes him so terrifying. But sort of when you get these other stories in the comics and the books and etc., it just reinforces that Darth Vader is Darth Vader, and there's nothing you can do to stop him. I have one last one, which is Vader on the page, but this is a novel instead of a comic. This is an interesting one. So this is from the book Thrawn Alliances. So this is not a massive spoiler for that book, but if you want to read it at some point knowing absolutely nothing, there's a little bit of a spoiler. This is a second book in the Imperial Thrawn trilogy, which is the Canon Thrawn trilogy, not to be confused with the Legends trilogy. And in this book, there's two parallel stories running. One back in the Clone Wars era with Thrawn meeting a Anakin Skywalker, and one in the present day of Thrawn working with Vader to defeat a mysterious villain on the edges of known space. And it's sort of set. When is it set? It's around Rebels time. It's sort of, I think it's between season 3 and 4. So it's after Thrawn has just taken a bit of an L on the planet, which I can't remember, that's got the Bendu on it. After the end of that series finale, Thrawn goes to see the Emperor, and he's like, "Oh, you've taken a bit of an L here, but you know, make it up to me. Can you go and sort out this issue that I have? Please take Vader along with you." And Thrawn, being very smart, instantly realizes that Vader is Anakin Skywalker that he's met all this time ago. But Vader sort of refuses to admit it, obviously, and he just sees Anakin Skywalker as the Jedi and not himself. So go away on this mission. Lots happens. Really cool story. Really, really good. But there's this moment, which I actually think is such a subtle but incredibly strong Vader moment, where they are in the unknown regions, which is the part of space which hasn't been charted with hyperspace lanes. There's loads of like nebulas and all that sort of stuff, so it's very difficult to traverse. And as you said, there's no hyperspace lanes, so you can't really jump through hyperspace to travel. So that's why it's the unknown regions. However, the Chiss, Thrawn's race, they have a way around that, which is they have young, Force-sensitive children who have this ability through the Force, and they don't call it the Force because they're Chiss. They don't understand it like that, but this ability to sort of like use foresight to predict the path through hyperspace so they can essentially travel through hyperspace. And Thrawn explains this to Vader because they need to head somewhere in hyperspace, and basically says, like, you should be able to do this because you're so strong in the Force. And what's really cool about this scene is Thrawn turns around and says some big long Chiss word of what they call this ability, but how it translates into basic is skywalking. So Thrawn's just like, oh yeah, skywalking. And then he's like, it reminds me of my good friend from the past, Anakin Skywalker, and sort of looks at Vader, and Vader's just sort of like, I know nothing of this, man. And then Vader goes to essentially use his power in the Force to chart a route through hyperspace in the spaceship that they're in. I think it's the Chimera, Thrawn's Imperial Star Destroyer. And it's sort of like he sees forward, he sees a meteor, so they need to turn right a little bit. He looks forward, there's a big nebula, they have to go to the left. He looks forward, he sees this, and he's like, everyone in the ship is just like watching Vader do this with like absolute awe, like, God, this guy is incredible. And like Thrawn's just there like, yeah, I know this guy can do this. It's such like a subtle scene, but it just shows Vader's strength in a completely different way. It's not like him lashing out and murdering like hundreds of people at once. It's actually him doing something useful in terms of like the protagonist of the story, who's Thrawn. But he's like essentially just charting a route through hyperspace using nothing but the Force. And it's just the way it reads on page, the way Timothy Zahn writes the whole thing. It's really, really cool moment for Vader. And it was one of these moments that when I finished that book, I was like, damn, that scene when he charted a route through hyperspace using nothing but the Force, that was pretty cool. So yeah, that's my book moment. I know, John, you haven't read this book, but from my description, do you think that that's a cool Vader moment?
Yeah, dude, it's such like a subtle flex sort of thing as well. That's obviously from what I remember. That's not really something that Vader has done before. So it's just the fact that he's able to just sit down and just do that straight away. He's like, yeah, I got this. That seems like a pretty subtle flex. I like it.
Yeah, and it's I think it's the fact that it's called skywalking as well. It's like just such a funny touch in the sense that Vader, throughout this whole story, doesn't refer to Anakin Skywalker as himself. He's just the Jedi. He's so detached from that part of him. But the fact he has to do something called skywalking to succeed in this mission, I think is sort of quite ironic for Vader. And I think it's just thematically quite a strong moment.
No, I agree. Yeah, I will have to give that book a read, to be fair. So
yeah, the whole
get around to it.
That whole Thrawn trilogy is really, really good. But the first one is objectively the best book. But I've got a soft spot for alliances just because of Vader and Anakin in it. It's a pretty fun read.
Oh, cool.
Shall we move on to why don't you take the video game moment that we have? I don't know. When will you run with that one?
Oh yeah. What? I mean,
big spoilers. Big spoilers.
Yeah, big spoilers for Jedi Fallen Order. So if you haven't played it yet, please don't listen to what I'm going to say, because I had it spoiled for me before I played it, and it definitely takes away from it. But just I can't imagine what it'd actually be like experiencing this moment.
Yeah, I actually didn't have it spoiled for me. I sort of kind of knew Vader was in the game at one point, but I hadn't really clocked that it was going to happen when it happens. So for me, I actually didn't have it spoiled, and I was I think I was on party chat to Jack, and he was just like, I kind of want to hear your reaction to what's about to happen. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a bit weird. And then I was just like, oh my God. So yeah, John, you described the moment.
All right. So basically to set the scene, you are right at the end of the game, pretty much. You've just defeated who you thought would be the final boss, one of the Inquisitors.
Thriller.
The one that's Thriller, yeah. The one that's been a pain in your backside the whole game. I think you fought it before, but this time was much more difficult. You know, it was the final boss, the challenge of the game. And you beat her and you think, sweet, all right, that's done. I can sit back, relax, complete my game. Unfortunately, that does not happen, because soon after you defeat her, a little cutscene happens, and in this cutscene, we get the iconic Vader breathing, as I mentioned before, and he just appears, jumps down from a little ledge, and just stabs Trilla in the back. And then basically you have to run away from Darth Vader, because there's no way the game thought that you could actually beat him, and there's no way they programmed Vader to be beaten. So you spend another 10 minutes after this just running away from the biggest boss in Star Wars, Darth Vader.
Yeah, I think Cal feeling a little bit confident here. He initially runs at Vader to try and attack him, and then Vader catches him in one hand. Cal then tries to throw a big tank at Vader. Vader then catches the tank in his other hand, and then just yeets you to the other side of the room. And then it's at that point that Cal's like, "Yeah, I'm running." There's no point. The whole way through the scene, there's all these objects flying around in the sky that Vader's just yeeting at you one after the other. He's ripping the whole building apart as you run. It's ridiculous. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I remember watching a TikTok a couple months back of someone like live streaming it. It was like a clip from their live stream, and like when Darth Vader appears and like kills Triller, and then like obviously Cal goes to like fight him, and he's like, this guy's just like, "Where's the health bar?" He's like, "Where's the health bar?" And he's like, because obviously you don't fight him, you just basically have to run away. So this guy was just like panicking about like he was gonna have to do. It basically just summed up perfectly
I think
I think everyone felt.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I love about this moment so much, because obviously it's in a video game, and video games in Star Wars, particularly with canon moments, can be a bit wobbly because it's like, balancing strength and that sort of thing. So as soon as I saw Vader, I was like, nah, there's no way you're actually going to fight Vader. That's just not even possible. And then instantly they did exactly what they should do, which is like, no, this is not a fight. This is a run for your life, because Cal Kestis is not strong enough in any way to fight him. And I think it's just another one of those moments which asserts Vader's absolute strength and dominance in the dark side and the reason that he is who he is. And it's really like a horror scene, isn't it? It's really like terrifying.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, because like obviously video games, people know like you've paid money to play the game, so you want to play the game and you want to win and do everything like that. You play like, I don't know, like a Marvel game, and like you can beat whatever boss they throw at you. Like it could be like Iceman versus Galactus, and you'll still win. But they went specifically, Vader is such a badass that they were like, I don't care how much money you've paid to play this game. You could have bought the Super Deluxe Edition or whatever. You're not winning. This is a character you will come up against, and all you can do is run away. You're not going to get a feeling of victory this time.
And I'm pretty sure anytime you run towards him, because obviously it's a video game, you can decide, actually, no, I'm going to run at him and swing my lightsaber, see what happens. You don't even get close. You're just dead.
No. Yeah.
Which I think, it's an incredible moment, and it's one of, I think it is probably the best cutscene in that entire game by a long shot. Just the hearing the breathing and like him just appearing from the smoke behind Triller is just like so menacing and terrifying. And if you're looking for entertainment, just go onto YouTube and get the compilation of people reacting to that scene, because it's so many people just losing their mind. It's really an incredible moment.
Yeah, it's a great ending actually to the game, and I think it definitely cements itself as to really give Vader his moment in that multimedia, being video games. I think that's definitely his moment in that multimedia form.
Yeah, it's like you spend like 40 hours playing the game as Cal Kestis, but it's like the 2 minutes of Darth Vader which steals the entire show.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's Vader's impact. He doesn't need more than 5 minutes to just completely take over the thing that he's in.
No, that is very true.
So should we jump to the films? Obviously, these are moments that our listeners are gonna probably know very, very well, being moments from the original trilogy that everyone's seen hundreds of times before, but they have to be mentioned because they are still Vader's greatest hits. So the first one I'll bring up is from A New Hope. I think this is quite a subtle little moment, but it's something that's stuck in my brain since I was a kid when I first saw this film, of like the first moment that I was really scared of Darth Vader. And it's the scene where Vader's in the room with all the Imperials and they're talking about the Death Star, the rebels, Vader's failure to get the rebel plans, and he's sort of getting mocked by there's Admiral Targa and then there's Admiral Motti, and they're sort of mocking him and saying that, the magic and wizards and all that sort of stuff is nothing in comparison to the strength of, the Death Star and all of this. And Vader just catches this guy in a force choke, and this is the first time I think we see Vader ever doing a force choke in the whole original trilogy, and he says, "I find your lack of faith disturbing." And it's just an epic quote. It's a moment of just absolute scene-stealing dominance from Darth Vader, and it is that moment that sticks in my brain since I was a kid, 4 or 5 years old, watching A New Hope for the first time, of like, I'm scared of Darth Vader right now. And I think it will always go down in movie history as one of sort of the most terrifying moments in sort of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's the first time we get to see Vader, like, show off just exactly what he's about. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's the first time we get to see the Force actually as well, and
Yeah, because obviously
seeing it being used.
Yeah, the scene previous to this, at the beginning of the film is the introduction to Vader. His presence alone, as we were talking about, the breathing and everything, is pretty scary. I want those rebels fine, and I want her alive, or whatever, when he's trying to get Vader, Leia. So that whole moment is obviously really cool. But this is like the moment, as you said, where you become scared of Vader, and particularly as a kid. I think probably George Lucas's intention was this was the scene that would scare kids, and I just think it's so effective.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the just reminded me actually the line a couple scenes later when Tarkin and Vader are talking about the Death Star, and he's like, the power to wipe out a planet is nothing in comparison to the power of the Force, or whatever. That always sticks in my brain as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's class, that one.
And it's just classic Darth Vader. That the dark side is stronger than anything, and I think all these examples we've just given you previous to this proves that he's got a point.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong whatsoever. Do you want to take the next one, John?
Of course. The next one, I believe, is the fight with Obi-Wan, unless I've forgotten something.
Yeah.
I think
old Ben.
Old Ben Kenobi, poor fella. This is the first lightsaber fight we ever get, I think, in Star Wars, isn't it?
It is. It
is. I mean, of course it is. It's the first film and literally like half an hour into it. But yeah, so the first lightsaber fight we get to see between Vader and Obi-Wan. And I think just the actual like part where Vader like ignites his lightsaber and it's just like the pure red glow, I think is just such an iconic like movie moment.
Yeah.
Because obviously we see Luke's lightsaber or Anakin's lightsaber a couple, like 20 minutes before, when Luke's like wailing it around like it's a fishing rod. But like watching Vader ignite his red lightsaber, and you're like, obviously done for dramatic effect of one's a bad guy, one's a good guy, blue and red, and it's just such a iconic moment that then has shaped. I think it's definitely shaped like just the Sith in general. Like that red lightsaber is just like iconic, and like you see a red lightsaber in Star Wars, and it's just like, oh, they're Sith, and that is the first time we ever get to see it.
And that moment really shaped Star Wars for the next, 40 years. That is, every lightsaber fight. People have their opinions on this fight scene about whether it's too slow and mechanical and anything like that. My argument is always that the point of this scene is this is Obi-Wan distracting Vader, and Vader toying with Obi-Wan, and they sort of both beat each other at the game, but ultimately Kenobi wants to die here because he knows that he'll help Luke more as a Force ghost than he will as a live sort of old man that he is at the moment. But to me, this is like the standoff. This is like the old samurai film standoff. This is for me what like sets up the entire future of every lightsaber fight that we've ever got from any Star Wars media after this. Stems from this original idea that George Lucas had of like two glowing laser swords, one red and one blue, stood off against each other. And the fact that like a lightsaber duel is more than just swinging. It's that game of mental chess that like Kenobi is playing with Vader and Vader is playing with Kenobi. Last time we met, you were the master, but now, no, was it last time we met I was but the apprentice, but now I am the master. Like everything in that scene is so like hints to that personal connection that the two of them have that obviously back at the time in the cinema people didn't know about. I think it's just such an important scene, and it might not be Vader's greatest show of power. It was quite easy for him to kill Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan wanted him to. But in terms of pure iconography of what that scene represented and everything that we've got since then, you can't take away from it, can you?
No, it's so good. And obviously got that iconic line you just mentioned, and it's everything about it is just brilliant. And I know like over the years we've had people remake it on like YouTube, as I think we've mentioned like once or twice before. But it's just how it's just perfect the way it is, to be honest. Like, it's, yeah, as you said, it's not like the most aggressive show of power I've ever seen from Vader, but like, yeah, the whole thing just, as you said, sets up Star Wars and everything to come later on like perfectly.
Yeah, and it was George's imagination in that moment, which really has given us 4 years worth of stories. It's sort of all boiled down to that sort of first ever a lightsaber fight between two sort of old friends. And yeah, just Vader in that moment is tense, it's terrifying, and Luke sees him slaughtering this like sort of new father figure. And yeah, it's one of the greatest moments, definitely. So we'll jump to Empire Strikes Back here. I mean, there's so many good moments in Empire Strikes Back, so we just tried to narrow it down to two. One of them being the obvious one. But this is one that I really, really love, and I think a lot of people do talk about this, is Vader's systematic choking of all the Imperial admirals that piss him off during the sort of first half of Empire Strikes Back. You are as clumsy as you are stupid, and killing Admiral Ozzel, and then his promotion of Captain Piet to Admiral Piet because he chokes out Admiral Ozzel right in front of him. He's not even in the same room as him. He's in his meditation chamber. He's talking over hollow, but his power of the Force is strong enough for him just to force choke him to death. I think it's such a show of power from Vader. It really shows why every single Imperial officer is terrified to be in the same room as him, because literally any of them could just get choked out. Later on, he kills, is it Captain Nida? He gets choked out by him as well. He just systematically wants to kill most of the people surrounding him, and it really sums up this idea that, like, being stuck on Vader's Star Destroyer with him is really the worst job posting you could ever have, because he's got a temper.
No, it really is not a job you want to fail at. You don't want to mess up working under Vader, because you're just going to get choked out. Basically, you better hope your wife at home's got life insurance, because all it takes is a slip of the finger on the keyboard, and that's it. You're wiped out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think something that George did so well with writing Vader was he managed to do so much with so little in terms of dialogue in particular. Vader doesn't say a huge amount, but what he says, some people can reflect back on the lines and say they're a bit cheesy. I disagree massively, but you're as clumsy as you are stupid. I think it's just such an iconic line. Everyone remembers that line. Everyone remembers just the look on Captain Piet's face as he just like watches his commanding officer get choked out and then he gets promoted. I just think the whole thing is just, it's one of the reasons why Empire Strikes Back is one of the greatest movies of all time. Is Vader throughout that entire film is just like rage, 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 scary, scary, scary. Oh, by the way, I'm your dad. And that moment hits so much harder because we've just watched him for 2 hours just like murder anyone who pisses him off remotely.
Yeah, makes me laugh about that as well. Is obviously he chokes out that admiral as you're talking about, and then promotes the guy standing like right next to him. But then, obviously, I don't think him at that time is after a promotion. It's like that's the last thing you want is Vader's giving you a promotion. So then, if anyone else makes a mistake on your ship, it's up to you. Like that's the last thing you want. You want to be a couple levels underneath, so that nothing's really your fault. Like you can just blame someone else.
Yeah, and
you're in charge. So,
and isn't it later on when he's like, right, I will speak to Lord Vader myself. Like when they cock up again, when they like lose the Falcon in the asteroid field, and you can just see in his face, he's like, oh no, I'm gonna have to let him down again.
He's gonna kill me.
It's so funny, like in some of the books and stuff, where you sort of get to spend time with like Imperial officers and just Imperial soldiers who are like in the same room as Vader. There's some brilliant scenes in Lost Stars where like one of the characters is in the same room as Vader when he's like doing all this stuff, like, choking out these admirals and stuff. And just everyone is just like, as soon as they find out what Star Destroyer they're on, the fact that it's Vader's, they're like, oh no, what have I done to end up here? What did I do in my past life to get this posting on Vader's ship? So yeah, that That's sort of one of the more light-hearted but also terrifying sides of Vader is his anger getting a lot of people killed.
Yeah. They go through stuff, I think, on his ship.
They do, yeah.
I'm trying to think what else happened. What other badass moments do we have in that film that we were going to talk about? Because there is so many in that film.
I think the main one that we wanted to talk about is just Luke versus Vader at the end of Empire Strikes Back, leading into the greatest plot twist of movie history.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good. I mean, as we were just talking about the lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan and Vader, so then I think jump into Empire and then the lightsaber fight between Luke and Vader. There's so much more happening, and it tells such a compelling story alongside like slightly more action.
Yeah,
and you can tell the whole fight that Vader's just like teasing Luke. He's just like playing with him the whole fight.
I think the thing that people often forget is Vader's not trying to kill Luke at this point. He's trying to recruit him. His initial goal is to get him to fall in the carbonite pit so he can freeze him. And then after that, he's just like, right, well, I'm going to recruit him one way or the other. And yeah, as he said, he's toying with Luke. And Luke's giving into a little bit of that Skywalker rage occasionally.
Yeah. Like the point in the fight that always sticks out in my mind is I think Luke just like starts up like just randomly swinging at Vader. I think it's an up, down, and then back up, and then so Luke's like really going for it, and Vader's just like one-handed, just like block, and it's like, come on. And it's just, you can just tell that Vader's literally cakewalking through this fight, and Luke is just like trying so hard.
Yeah, and I think it's such a significant story moment because Luke in Empire doesn't complete his training with Yoda. He's not ready to face Vader. Yoda tells him he's not ready. Obi-Wan even tells him he's not ready. But he goes anyway because Luke's impulsive. He cares more about his friends than he does about being a Jedi in this moment and all that sort of stuff. And because he's not ready, he loses a hand.
Yeah, you get punished. It's because, doesn't he basically he like clips Vader's shoulder, doesn't he, with his lightsaber? And I think that's when the Vader's just like, you know what, that's it. I'm done.
That hand and that lightsaber has got to go.
That hand is coming off, and you were sitting there and you were listening to me. I'm not messing around anymore. I
think there's so many iconic moments in it. Obviously, you've got the carbonite freezing room with that iconic shot of like the lightsabers lighting in the mist with the two of them stood, and that whole shot is just absolutely beautiful. You got the moment before they go onto the platform of like Vader just lobbing stuff at Luke, and Luke just like not even being able to bat it away. He's just like getting like loads of boxes and stuff thrown at him. And then obviously there's your grand finale on the walkway when Vader's like, right, I've had enough, hand off. It's time. Obi-Wan never told you about your father. He told me you killed him. No. And
such a great line.
I think this is one of the things that I discuss quite a lot with people is like some people fairly say that once you know the Vader twist, it doesn't quite hit the same. And majority of people in the world now know that Vader is Luke's father. But every time I watch Empire Strikes Back, it does not matter the fact that I know every single thing about the relationship and the story. That moment still hits me every single time. It's James Earl Jones's delivery. It's Mark Hamill's reaction. No, that's impossible. Just everything about that moment. The Imperial March music kicking in when he hears it. It's just one of the most powerful moments in like movie history, and I would do anything to be able to have my mind wipe, travel back in time to that year and experience it in the cinema, because I just couldn't possibly imagine what that reaction would have been like.
Yeah, no, I mean, either. I mean, thank God back then they didn't have social media. Otherwise, that would have been everything spoiled.
Yeah, someone would have come out the midnight release and tweeted, "Lol, Luke's dad is Vader."
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I had friends when Force Awakens came out, and they were like straight on Twitter, like hand eyes, and I was like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, so, loads of people did that. Yeah,
couldn't imagine what it'd been like back then with that plot twist.
Yeah, and I think it really does stand the test of time. I look forward to one day having kids of my own that I can show that moment and watch the look on their faces when they're like, no way, that can't be true. Yeah, it's in my opinion, regardless of how awesome all these moments we talk about, this for me is Vader's greatest hit. I think this is the moment that I think about every time I think of Darth Vader, is that him with his hand stretched out, saying, "No, I am your father," and just, it's too good. It's too good. What did we do to deserve a moment like that?
I know. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. And should we wrap this up with our last moment, which is from Return of the Jedi, Luke versus Vader in the throne room, and Darth Vader killing Emperor Sheev Palps to bring balance to the Force.
I mean, what an unbelievable fight again. I mean, I think this is I think I said this. This is the first time we get to see a classic lightsaber throw from Vader as well.
Yeah,
it's the first time we get to see it, where he yeets his lightsaber at Luke and then comes returning back to him. I mean, the more you think about that, that is actually some huge Force skills there, to be able to throw such a delicate object and then
Force boomerang,
have it come back and not slice you in half because it's facing the wrong way. So good. And then just, I mean, the emotional toil in that final scene between, Luke, Vader, the Emperor. It's just, I mean, the Vader coming back as Anakin
in his final moment.
In his final moment, and yeeting old Sheev over the balcony to his death, and then the whole, Luke, take my mask off so I can see you in my eyes. It's just one of the best Vader moments in all of multimedia.
Yeah,
it's so good.
And I think the whole fight is so significant because I can't remember whether this was the answer I gave when we talked about lightsaber duels, but this is definitely up there for me of the best lightsaber duels in Star Wars, because there's so much story, there's so much emotion. This goes from the Emperor wanting Luke to give in to his anger, Luke basically giving in to his anger, igniting his lightsaber, Vader stopping him with that epic sort of cross across Palpatine's laughing face, and then the whole the fight, and then Luke sort of saying, I don't really want to fight you. And then Vader threatening his sister, and then Luke going absolutely ballistic and beating Vader nearly to death. And then in that moment, gaining his control back and saying, laying down his weapon, I'm a Jedi, like my father before me. In that moment, obviously incredible. We love it. But then it's just Vader's reaction to seeing Luke getting fried by the Emperor, and finally that Anakin coming back and saying, no, that's my son right there, you shrivelly old testicle looking Emperor. you're getting yeeted to your death.
Yeah, I think as well as we get to see such a different side of Vader, after Luke's finished wailing on him and he's kind of just laying there, hands gone, wheezing, with the addition of the prequels and all the other multimedia that we get, Vader becomes he's obviously one of the most, intimidating and scariest villains in pop culture. So also alongside that being one of the most tragic, I think that scene is obviously where we get to see that for the first time, where he's obviously,
it's that ultimate moment of tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah. And just how crippled and half of a man he actually has become because of being Darth Vader. I think showing that is really a lot deeper, and I think a lot of people obviously realize that when they've watched it for the first time.
And it's that moment of when you've gone through those trilogy of films, really disliking Vader. Obviously we love Vader as a great villain, but really disliking him as a character. He's evil, he's chopped off Luke's hands, sold off Han Solo, tortured Leia, he's done all this stuff to our favorite characters. And then that weird internal dialogue you have with yourself when you suddenly have sympathy for this nasty evil man in his final moments, and then cheering for him a few minutes later when he defeats the Emperor, and then crying for him when he's sort of dying and looking upon his son. I just think it's, after everything you've gone through that trilogy, the fact that you're able to feel all those emotions to Vader, like a literal like machine of death, I think is just one of the most powerful things about the whole trilogy and the whole of Star Wars in general.
Yeah, definitely. So that's I always say with this when it comes to Star Wars, like as much as it's a film or show or book or comic about like laser swords and space wizards and all that jazz, at the end of the day, it's all just about like what emotion can George Lucas, Dave Filoni, or whoever get from us through that multimedia, and I think that scene through Luke and through Vader is definitely like hits the emotional hotspot right there. So it's definitely one of Vader's greatest hits. If you don't have that in one of your top Vader moments, what are you playing at?
And one of the points I love to discuss about this is the often, like, in the real world, if someone has spent his entire life like murdering children, thousands and thousands of people, and overseeing planets being destroyed, does one single act of heroism and love at the end of their life redeem their character? In the real world, obviously not. No, absolutely not. However, in just the way that it's written and the mythology of Star Wars and the fantasy aspect of it, like Anakin is redeemed at the end of his life. I think what's really interesting is in some of the books, like Leia in particular really reflects on, like, she still doesn't see Vader as her father because she doesn't see this redemption that Luke sees. And you can understand that, like, he never really earned it in her eyes, but it was enough in Luke's eyes, and in the grand fantasy of Star Wars, as us as audience, is like that's Vader's moment of redemption, and that's Anakin's moment to like come back to the light, and obviously gets his Force Ghost at the end, and we get to see Hayden Christensen in the weird special edition of the film. But I do always think it's an interesting conversation to have of, like, in the real world, Vader does not get let off the hook by that one single act, but it works so well within the context of the film that we allow it.
Yeah. I always remember when that special edition came out as well, and Hayden Christensen got his time as a Force Ghost, and people were always like, well, then that he hasn't come back as Anakin at the end. Can you choose what you look like as a Force Ghost? Because why isn't Obi-Wan looking like Ewan McGregor if you can just like make yourself like 30 years younger?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, surely if you're Obi-Wan, you're thinking, damn, I look good with a beard back in the Clone Wars. Like, that's what I want to look like as a Force Ghost.
A questionable choice there, creation choice, but
it's Star Wars, so we let it pass.
Yeah, it's great. We love Hayden.
So yeah, those are our picks for Darth Vader's greatest hits. I'm sure there's still more that we've missed. I mean, there's some moments from the TV shows that we didn't even quite get time to touch on. So if, as I said at the beginning, if anyone's got any Star Wars Vader great moments that we've missed, let us know. We're on Instagram @Live from Vaders Castle. We're on Twitter @Vaders Castle Pod. Quite happy to keep the discussion going. But that's been mine and John's picks for some of Darth Vader's absolute greatest hits. And I think maybe sometime down the line we could do this for some other characters. Luke Skywalker comes to mind, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So if you'd like to see that, let us know. And we can maybe next time one of us goes on holiday and we need to pre-record an episode. This is what we'll do.
Yeah, this could be our pre-recorded ideas.
Yeah. So we shall be back next week. Sounds weird saying that because it'll be a while for us, but for you, it'll be next week with 2 episodes of Bad Batch to review. The one that came out yesterday and the one that will come out next week. So you've got that to look forward to. And then we'll also have our book review for Into the Dark coming up soon as well. So there's stuff to look forward to. Yeah,
exciting podcast coming up. So keep listening, please.
Yeah, that was a fun discussion, John. Did you enjoy that?
I did, actually. Yeah, I mean, as I said at the beginning, that it's nice to discuss these things instead of just reading them and being like, "Holy cow!" in your room by yourself.
And you could easily sit and talk about Darth Vader for 20 hours, let alone one. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like I've definitely bored some people to death with some discussions I've had about Darth Vader. So that was enjoyable that time.
Yes, the one time though, if people listen to this, they won't be bored. Hopefully.
Well, hopefully.
Hopefully. Let us know if you are bored.
No, please don't. I can't take it.
Right. Well, that's been episode 12 of Live from Vaders Castle, and thank you very much for listening. Thanks for bearing with us with our little pre-recorded episodes. But I'm as you're listening to this, I'm currently in England with my chums, and I'm sure me and John will probably, when we're having a pint, will probably just be talking about more Darth Vader anyway. So
yeah, I'm sure we'll somehow be able to talk about it for more
for more time,
a longer length of time. Yeah,
or we'll be debating how good Last Jedi is with Joe, our other friend, which probably will go on for hours and hours as well. But that's what happens when you're a Star Wars fan.
Hours of fun.
Right. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thank you. Bye.